Well, good morning. We'll go ahead and if everybody will find their place and get started for this April the 11th, 2019 meeting of the Municipal Solid Waste and Resource Recovery Advisory Council. As usual, we'll start by introducing ourselves at the diocese and then the folks out in the audience. So, Rosemary, if you'd like to begin.
I'm Rosemary Wyman with Bear Engineering, and I represent the general public.
Kevin Martinolich with Liberty Tire, represent the tire industry.
Commissioner Wolf in Guadalupe County, representing counties under 130,000.
Maurice Pitts, Lee County Commissioner, and I represent counties of any size.
Cheryl Murga with the Houston-Galveston Area Council, representing the planning region.
Jeff Mayfield, North Texas Municipal Water District, representing Public Solid Waste District or authorities.
Richard McHale, City of Austin, representing a city or county solid waste agency.
I'm Chuck Rivette with Waste Management. I represent a professional with experience managing a commercial solid waste landfill.
And I'm Holly Holder with Park Hill Smith & Cooper in Lubbock, Texas, and I represent licensed professional engineers working in the solid waste industry.
I'm Risa Weinberger with Risa Weinberger and Associates, and I represent the composting industry.
Good morning, Scott Pasternak with Burns & McDonnell, and I represent the general public.
Trent Perez with City of Pearland. I represent cities over 100,000 to 750,000.
Good morning, Earl Lott. I'm the director of the Waste Permits Division with TCEQ.
Chance Gooden with the TCEQ Municipal Solid Waste Permits Program.
The Solid Waste Permit Section.
Diane Barnes, MSW Permit Section.
Gene Mueller with the TCEQ Waste Permits Division.
Kristen Hernandez, a Municipal Solid Waste Permit Section.
Kimberly Lyle, Texas Association of Regional Councils.
David Greer with the Public Education Section.
Ken May, Capillary Council of Governments.
Well, great. Thank you for all being here. And with that, I will turn it over to Earl Lott. Welcome, Earl.
Thank you, Holly. And good morning, everyone. Glad you are all able to make it again today. So before we get started, I would like to recognize someone has a birthday coming up in this room, Mr. Chance Gooden here. So if y'all want to sing happy birthday to him, I'm fine with that. So
Please do not do
that. Oh, we'll get that in the public comment period.
Anyway, things have been pretty busy for us lately, to say the least. We're in the middle of the legislative session, I guess about 40-something days to go still. And we've had a number of bills filed this session impacting municipal solid waste program. I think there was over 30 bills. Is that right, Chance? 32?
Yep.
Or,
we have
or
exactly
something?
32 for IHW, but 30 for MSW.
Yeah, so quite an active session, and we've analyzed all those bills and provided feedback and whatnot. So I have attended several hearings this session on some bills that are getting some traction. Just to highlight a few of them, there was a bill proposed to increase the landfill application fee from $150 to $2,000. There's also another version of this bill in the Senate that is proposing to increase the application fee for MSW applications to $5,000. So I know that's been heard once so far in hearing. Another one is requiring through statute that the agency conduct site visits prior to permitting an application. So that's something that we've implemented in practice over the last couple of years anyway, but this would make it mandatory where permitting staff would go out and confirm certain aspects of the site prior to actually issuing a permit. Let's see. Oh, there's another bill that would actually prohibit municipalities and and local authorities from requiring any permits as a condition for issuance of a municipal solid waste permit. Now, that bill does not circumvent the requirement for an applicant to still go and get approval from a city or a county like a development permit. But the bill basically says it can't be more stringent than the TCEQ requirements, and it's not a condition for our environmental permit that we're issuing to facilities. And I know that bill has been heard in a committee as well. Another bill that was filed this session, we've seen these before, allowing solid waste disposal services within the ETJ of a certain city. Scrap tire transporter bill is back up. You know, that was the bill that was, it was passed last session and it got vetoed by the governor. So, you know, another bill has been filed this session, and I would say it's a very much cleaned up version of the previous one. It's not nearly as comprehensive, and it just adds a financial assurance requirement for transporters is one of the major differences, as well as scrap tire processors and what's the other one, Gene, I'm missing? And storage facilities, yes. So anyway, that bill has been heard as well. And then quite a number of recycling bills aimed at encouraging recycling. There is one that would require that we incentivize recycling operations, and David Greer was kind of the head on that one from our environmental education group. That one is moving along at a pretty good pace. Another recycling bill would encourage the recycling of plastics through pyrolysis, and it would basically exempt those facilities. In other words, if you had a pyrolysis operation that was using a solid or had insignificant amount of solid waste along with the plastic, it could be used for conversion of that plastic into fuel, and it would be exempt from our permitting requirements. So that bill has been heard in both chambers at this point. There are a number of other bills that we have not had hearings on yet, but I suspect the next week is going to be pretty busy for us. I have heard rumors that they're going to have a kind of a waste day at the Capitol for the House and the Senate. So we'll probably hear quite a number of bills. I'm sure it's it's going to be an all-day affair. So getting up to speed on those issues. In addition to legislative session, this last week, actually 4 weeks, we've been very busy with the ITC tank fires in the Deer Park area. And then I guess 2 weeks after that one happened, then we had an explosion at KMCO, which is a chemical plant. So we're dealing with a lot of waste issues and recovery efforts right now on that end, because a lot of that material is solid waste, as you know. So we've been busy on that. Everyone from the commissioners to executive director to staff level, we've been working with the community and our emergency response team to help with recovery efforts there. There's just a lot of moving pieces there, from air to waste to water supplies being impacted to wastewater discharge authorizations, you name it. And there's a lot of that material that ended up in the ship channel that's being recovered by barge now. And then all that wastewater is going to have to be disposed of somewhere. So we're working a lot to identify facilities for disposal. A lot of underground injection wells in the area, as well as hazardous waste management facilities. So that's been kind of the primary focus the last 4 weeks for us. But with that, I mean, I'll turn it over to y'all for any questions you may have. And yes, sir.
Earl, are there currently, this is regarding the pyrolysis bill, are there currently facilities that are permitted, existing facilities, or is there a perception that maybe that's a hurdle, the permitting part is a hurdle, and that's why the bill is out there? I'm just curious.
We do not, that I'm aware of, have any permitted facilities for that type of material, plastics. There were a couple of permitted tire pyrolysis facilities, and this bill doesn't change that. That would still be required to obtain a permit. It just pertains to plastic. But it's my understanding that the American Chemical Council has really endorsed this, and I think 6 or 7 other states already have this in statute. So, you know, it's kind of moving us in that direction as well. And it establishes a market for the 3 through 7 grade plastics. I think 1 and 2 plastics are already a pretty established market, but this would allow for the 3 through 7 that's currently doesn't have a home in a lot of cases, an avenue for recycling. So, and you know, a lot of this is impacted by the China sort, as y'all have probably heard. So, and those markets being diminished. So,
On the bill associated with the reducing the impact of a local permit, is there an example of a local permit that's kind of drastically interfered with a landfill being constructed or expanded? Can you give some understanding of what the motivation is maybe behind reducing that permitting, or their right to have influence that permit process?
now I can't speak for the author of this bill, what specific case that they've had issues with that, but I guess if a county had some sort of a development permit requirement, it would not be required prior to obtaining the MSW authorization. It's not a condition of our permit. In other words, if you said there can be a condition where you'd have to get an authorization from a county prior to getting our authorization for the landfill. I don't know if I'm being
No,
clear
I get what
there.
you're saying. I mean, essentially, the permitting process is not intended to bypass the local municipalities if they want to prevent a landfill from developing within their boundaries, correct? It's just changing the timing, and then you had said that the bill is authored such that the county can't, or county or municipality cannot make requirements that are more stringent than y'all's.
Right.
I mean, I guess maybe more of a comment. I would have some concerns about that I hope that bill doesn't pass. I think that local municipalities should have the right to be able to say, you know, we would like to require them to have these, you know, a certain height berms, or put in, you know, if it was us, more of a spread of injector wells to make sure that we don't have contamination of the air pollutants. I guess is the language of the bill intended to prevent municipalities from having any kind of any authority such as that?
No. So the way I understand the bill, the municipality would not have authority into our permitting process. Now, they would still have their rights as, you know, if there's some sort of construction permit required, or, you know, any local controls that the county may have independently of us, it would still apply. It just wouldn't be a part of the permitting process. In other words, it would not put the onus on our permitting staff to deal with those local issues, the way I understand it.
Okay.
On that same bill, does that apply only to landfills, or is it other permitted or registered MSW facilities?
Right now, it does have landfills and registration.
Yeah, it's a solid waste facility.
Okay.
Right, so it's not just landfills. It would include transfer stations and.
What is that particular bill? Do you have the number and who authored it?
It's House Bill 2723 by Darby.
Do you think that if a municipality was trying to limit or at least bracket hours of operations and days, that would be considered a conflict with TCEQ rules? Or if it was handled through the development process, then that would be acceptable as the bill is at least currently written?
hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but you know, we've already got operating hours in our
Right.
as our application conditions, so,
And your regs already have a provision for alternative operating rules.
Right.
Within your
That's
ru-
right.
I mean, operating hours within your rules.
that is correct.
Earl, has a date been set for that waste day at the legislature, or is that still to be determined when that would happen?
I thought it was gonna be this Wednesday, but that did not happen.
Okay.
So, not sure.
Okay.
Earl, going back to that bill, do you know how it would impact the authority that the counties have to prohibit solid waste facilities within certain boundaries?
You're speaking of the ordinance authority. The way this bill is written, it does not impact the ordinance authority, is my understanding.
Because it's separate.
Right,
in their
because
own
counties
powers.
can still pass, they can designate areas where landfills or waste facilities can be located. However, they have to designate
Right.
areas where they can be as
Acceptable.
well. So.
Okay, thank you.
I just pulled it up, and I don't know if this is the most current version, but the first subparagraph, an applicant for a permit under this subchapter is not required to obtain a permit for the siting, construction, or operation of a hazardous waste management or municipal solid waste facility from a local government or other political subdivision of the state. I mean, as I read that, that basically means that the county can't tell them no. Because it specifically says siting, construction. So permitting is a construction permit. County doesn't have the authority to put in planning requirements. They're not given that authority via the state. Only a city can. Most of these, I wouldn't be aware of a whole lot of landfills that are going to go inside city limits. So they'd go into a county. There's not a whole lot of planning authority. If this bill passes, then the county can't say, well, you cannot build it here or you cannot site it here. If that language stays, that seems
Actually,
bothersome.
I'm not sure if that's 100% correct. The county landfill siting ordinance is one of the powers that a county can adopt. They're required to do, like in the Houston area, there's 3 or 4, or they're not required. And the main thing is you can't put it here, but you are allowed to put it here. So it is authority that they do have that is part of their, kind of almost a quasi-police power.
No, that I understand. Currently they can say you can build these and these things, or such kind of facilities in certain locations. But this would say, if this language passes, says they don't have the authority to site. They don't have to permit for the siting or construction. So it's essentially, as I read it, stripping them of that authority.
Well, don't the COGS in the regional solid waste plans have some kind of say in a landfill permit or a siting situation?
Yes, as long as it's backed up by the solid waste regional COG plan, and then we work with our local governments. But most COGs don't work to prohibit landfills. If a county has a landfill ordinance that says it can only go in XYZ area, we would defer to that first.
So Earl, going back to what Trent just read in that proposed bill, it sounds like perhaps TCEQ's interpretation of that bill is that it would not invalidate a county's ability to do a siting ordinance?
Oh, that is our understanding of it. It does not impact the siting ordinance
Okay.
portion.
Yeah,
Right.
because I had heard some people had that same question that Trent just raised. So just interested to
Right.
hear TCEQ's
That-
opinion
That's
on
our interpretation of it. Now, I don't know if that's the intent behind it or what.
And maybe this is an older version of the bill, and maybe that the language has been subsequently modified. This is just what I was able to pull up from Texas.gov. But I guess, at least on the advisory council, I'd like to follow that bill a little more closely and get some updates on whether it's going to get traction. I would doubt that representatives, particularly in these counties, would want to give up that authority or allow their counties to be able to give up that authority. So I would hope that it doesn't get very, very much traction, but I think it is something we need to follow closely.
Is Darby's in San Angelo?
Yes.
This Laredo again? Is this targeted at the Laredo facility?
Not
I
that
don't
I'm
believe
aware
so.
of. Yeah, we don't know the history on this.
San Angelo. Who knows?
I mean,
Okay.
I don't have
we
anything right now.
don't have anything specific.
I
And there's a couple of other bills that we haven't seen at hearing yet that requires notice to all homeowners during real estate transactions if we're within a mile of a solid waste facility. So as part of a real estate transaction, they would have to provide notice that you're within a mile of a landfill, transfer station, or what have you.
Just as an observation, back on the previous bill you were talking about, we have seen situations, and I know you've seen them, where it's not necessarily the county citing ordinance that comes into play, but some local requirement that just goes wildly beyond TCEQ requirements in an effort, by a local entity to block a facility, and it really has nothing to do with that county citing ordinance. Sometimes they're pretty outlandish.
Right.
So-
And one of the things I didn't mention, there's several bills targeting floodplain requirements as well. So
this, and we'll beat this to death and then move on, I guess, the Darby's bill. That's existing legislation for hazardous waste management. They're just adding the words "or municipal solid
that
waste."
is correct. That's a good
So
point, Chair.
they're just making consistency with all TCEQ regulated facilities instead of just one type of facility, I guess.
Earl, I noticed you've got a list. Do you have a summary sheet that you guys could make available to the council where we can kind of see all the bills that have been proposed?
Mr. May has the best one I've seen. You got it right there.
You bet we can get you one, or
It's just what we follow, though.
yes, it's just what we follow, the ones that are directly impacting.
Well, that's all
Okay.
I would think we'd be interested in.
We can get you that. Charlie maintains that list, so.
Several of the COGs make that list. HJC has an excellent list. Ken's COG has a very, very good list. It's more broad than just municipal solid waste. It affects a lot of environmental issues.
Yeah, one of the other significant ones I mentioned, floodplains, is there's a bill that would require applicants for solid waste facilities permits to, if you're located in or near a floodplain, you would have to receive a letter of map change from FEMA as well as local floodplain administrator prior to receiving a permit. Right now, we use the CLOMA process. If you all are familiar with that, this would go a step further and require the letter of map change, which shows your final construction design and controls as approved by FEMA in these cases.
And that's before we issue a permit.
Well, didn't that mean you also have constructed those drainage facilities?
That's the way we would interpret it, yes.
So that could push back getting a permit years. I mean, by the time you design and construct, submit documents to FEMA, and get the letter of, finally you receive the letter that the maps have been revised, that could take a couple of years or more.
A couple of years and a fortune
Mm.
in construction, sunk costs.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this at length. I mean, I deal with floodplain on a regular basis. I don't know that the landfills it's going to affect the operation of the landfill, whether or not they're in the floodplain at all, because they don't have a whole lot of structures that would require, that they would care about from an insurance purpose, which is the entire, at least for a local municipality, that's what those maps are used to help guide what needs to be insured at this rate versus that rate. What's the likelihood of this structure, a structure in this area flooding as opposed to a structure in the other area flooding? They're not great tools for determining how floodwaters will actually move through a community. Not to say that they're going to ask me for my testimony on it, but I just don't think that's necessary or beneficial at all. I think it does end up delaying it significantly because the letter map revisions, either Lomar fill, Lomar F, which is Lomar by fill, or a straight Lomar. They require the infrastructure to be in place before the Lomar is certified. So the FEMA doesn't sign off on it until the infrastructure is in place.
And that's a good point, Trench, that you bring up, because I guess it is an insurance-based requirement, and we're using it to demonstrate protection of, or preventing the washout of waste.
Yeah,
And protecting the site from flood inundation.
And I would say that tool it's useful for what it's used for. It helps to guide you. This is where you have a high propensity for flooding, but it is not a useful tool to understand the exact hydraulics of water flowing across an area. It's just it's a risk management tool. If it's used to try and mimic an understanding of hydraulics across a piece of land, it's just not the right tool. I mean, I could understand if they said we want a hydraulic analysis of your pre and post construction, as we do with most development, to find out what the impacts of the development have to the drainage or in the surrounding area. That would make more sense. But just saying we went to FEMA and did a CLOMAR and checked a box, even if wherever the box was checked, it doesn't help or hurt anybody. Well, I mean, I guess it does hurt the landfill because they're delayed indefinitely, and they may have to go put in some significant expense before they get permitted. I don't know. I wouldn't speak for landfills from the development perspective, but I know that commercial developers and single-family residential developers would have a tough time swallowing that cost preemptively.
The box that puts people in is you have to actually create the drainage improvements before you actually get your solid waste permit, which there's no guarantee you'll get your solid waste permit. So you could literally spend millions of dollars on a drainage improvement, still have your permit denied, and it was all for nothing.
Again, and it doesn't have anything to do with the operation of the landfill.
No, the whole FEMA maps is a residual when the subtitle D laws came out in the early 1990s, October 1993. It just says you can't cite a landfill in a 100-year floodplain with no real definition of a 100-year floodplain. And the follow-up TCQ did, just to give some clarity, because there were several epic battles in SOA where engineers dueled on how to determine a floodplain, right? And you get, endless debates about coefficients and all this stuff, right? And so the default was that the FEMA map would become, is the word prima facie, is that what they use?
Prima facie, right.
Prima facie evidence. And so that's how the whole thing, and I mean, you're right, it's an improper use of a tool that's intended for a totally different purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably give a lecture series on the inaccuracies of those maps. They're appropriate most of the time for what they're used for, but maybe this is presumptive for me to offer this, but is there something that us as a body want to do in order to maybe hope to influence whether or not this is done, whether or not this bill is accepted? Would we want to offer a recommendation that the LOMAR or CLOMAR should not be a condition of the municipal solid waste permit for all the reasons that we stated? Or should we just sit back and hope for the best?
Well, I think what we would have to do is make a recommendation to commissioners, correct? And hope that one of them could take that forward, or is it? It seems like in the past that we've always had that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it would take a resolution to the commission, and I don't know that we would be able to, we're usually a resource in hearings.
You're not really allowed to lobby.
Right, we're not allowed to lobby.
For certain
right.
legislation.
So now, this issue has become front and center with a lot of our applications. Believe it or not, the whole floodplain discussion, and you bring up a good point that the FEMA maps, a lot of them were developed in the 70s and 80s, and they're outdated, and floodplains change, and they're not a definite. So we get a lot of feedback. Well, during the application process, we say FEMA maps are prima facie evidence, and we go with that. That was submitted by an applicant. But then we get maps that contradict that from a protestant showing, well, they did their own study, or a county did their study, and the floodplain is actually this. And then, you know, our process is we will work with an applicant and have them address that to try to overcome those issues that are brought up. And it becomes quite a challenge, a lot of back and forth.
Well, I wonder, is that gonna not allow the local floodplain administrator to weigh in on that? Because, I mean, Trent, you do a lot of development. You know, a lot of your developments are in counties, and then most counties have a floodplain administrator that's their responsibility, is to look at that development and how that may or may not impact their floodplain.
And none of this circumvents that requirement. We still have to work with the local floodplain administrator as well as FEMA.
It changes the timing.
Yeah, but it also puts a requirement that's non-beneficial, I think, to really anybody, other than to say, well, we made them do something, which, I mean, as a politician, I would say is generally politics at its worst. You say you're addressing a problem by something that's ineffective. I mean, if given the opportunity, I would say certainly a hydraulic analysis is appropriate, but a CLOMAR or a LOMAR is inappropriate. I mean, to your point about the inaccuracies of the map, I mean, Pearland's maps are dated 1999 when we had about 30,000 people. We now have 130,000 people. It's wholly inaccurate. But those are the effective maps that must be used right now when developing. Most of the counties, the unincorporated portions of the counties, the maps are going to be much older than that. May not necessarily be as wildly inaccurate because there hadn't been development in that area, but I just don't. I don't know if there's a way that we could make a recommendation. It seems, it just doesn't seem appropriate to add that condition, because it doesn't help anybody, and it just delays the ability for what I would say a responsible landfill who wants to or needs to expand or build. It just delays them and costs them a whole bunch of money up front that they may not be able to recover, which is, as a developer agent, that's what you hope to avoid that. As a lawmaker, I hope to avoid that. Just checking a box and not really having it affect anything.
Maybe a better approach would be to provide, our body could provide some guidance or suggestion on how we look at this into the future, how we resolve these matters. Because like I said, we require the local floodplain map. However, if they're outdated or if a map doesn't exist, we require all applicants to do their own H&H study, and they provide that information. But when you have two hydrologists providing maps that are different, I mean, we've got to resolve that matter. And we usually work with the local floodplain administrator. That's our process to address it.
Well, I've kind of said as a running joke, though it's true. I mean, if you told me you want to do a hydraulic study to look at the flooding of your property, I would tell you, well, what do you want me to tell you, that it floods or doesn't flood? Because I can make both the reports and they'll both be accurate. So, I mean, I think having two hydrologists, if that is an outside agency that reviews it, which would be the local floodplain manager, I mean, if they approve a hydraulic analysis, then that should be the final say. But getting FEMA involved just doesn't help at all.
What's that bill?
There's a couple of them aimed at that.
What'd you say, Ken?
1338 is that House bill?
Senate bill.
Senate bill. 1338.
And then there's a House Bill 4568.
And 990.
And then House Bill 990. Okay.
What was the last one you said? 990?
990?
Senate Bill 990? Okay. Which is a companion to 4568. Are all those bills in committee? Have they been hearings on those yet, or?
They have not gone to hearing yet. I suspect in the next week or two.
So are they gonna be directing you guys to determine what's the best method, or are they gonna be telling you this is what you do?
No, we're just there as a resource. We would explain our current process and the way we handle these matters. Just kind of like I explained to you. We defer to local floodplain administrator and FEMA in those situations, but we're not lobbying for or against or making any recommendations on the bill.
Anything else for Earl?
Well, there's a lot of bills.
Sounds like a interesting spring in Austin, huh?
We're ahead of schedule.
Earl, is there anything else you'd like to present, or are you ready to hand it off to
I believe
Chance?
that just about covers it all.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions?
No more questions on bills? We had allotted enough time for that, so we're ahead of a schedule. So there's something that y'all were following that we were not following.
Do you have any comments or observations on the recycling bill that you mentioned?
Not me specifically, but David Greer's here because he follows that bill. If there's something you want to talk about
Just
recycling,
general
David?
information about where that stands and what it'll do?
Morning, David.
We're good. I'm assuming Earl was referring to House Bill 286 and its companion Senate Bill 649. Oh, by the way, I'm David Greer with Public Education section. And both of those bills have passed out of their respective committees. And they're both, the House bill is waiting on a hearing in the House, as well as the Senate bill. It's been placed on the intent calendar. So it's just waiting to be heard in the House and Senate.
This is yours.
I will say that they were filed as companions, so they were identical language. The language on House Bill 286 committee substitute is different from the committee substitute for Senate Bill 649.
Do you want to have any questions for David? Well, we got him up there. You'll have another shot at him in the public comment period if there's anything that you think of, so.
Thank you.
David, thank you. Okay, Chance.
All right.
We will pass the.
We're
pass
ahead
the
of
ball to you.
schedule, so we wanted to give everyone enough time to talk about the bills they wanted to talk since we had a significant amount, but we're ahead of schedule, so that's good. MSW update. So we generally start off with staffing, and y'all have a org chart in your folders, and we still have 2 vacancies in each team, and we haven't posted those. We're kind of holding off, waiting for our spring graduates to get closer to graduating. We plan to post those soon and see what we can get from recent grads or both entry-level positions. We did fill 2 of those. Alon and Nathalie are both new staff members that have joined us. We had 4 positions, remember, last time we met. 2 of those have been filled. Both of them are in training today. Actually, one is out, but the other one's in training. So maybe our next meeting they'll be here. I'll introduce you to them. But I do have Kristen. She introduced herself earlier, and she was new last time, but she was in training, so she wasn't able to come. So she's here today, so you can put a face with a name, Kristen, and I could say that she is a rock star. We're glad to have her. She has her PhD, so we're very thankful that she's here, and she's already hit the floor running. Did an amendment already to a permit and registration and many other things, and all ahead of schedule, mind you. So I'm very pleased with how she's hit the floor running. So major projects that we have in-house. I'm happy to say that We have 28 now. That means that we got 3 issued since the last time we met. So we're usually around 30, 32, but we're down to 28. So not that I'm saying I want more, but we are getting them out the door, which is good. Some of those were probably with the new processes that we put into place, and some probably not. But I really appreciate the industry and those that they work with using these new forms and the new version of the checklist to help us process these things in a expeditious and consistent manner.
These 28, Chance, these are.
They're
new-
major
They're major
ones. Yeah,
amendments. and-
they're the ones that are usually take the majority of our time. It doesn't include any type of modifications or notice of intents or those type of things. We usually process around anywhere from 200 to 250 a year total. That's our commitment, and that's what we do. But bigger projects are usually around 30. They fluctuate around the 30 range. So those are the only ones I really give y'all an update on. Those are the big ticket items. It's either something new or some major amendment or limited scope or registration, those type of things. So, Jess Bender's pulled this up. I wanted to bring this to your attention. It's not live yet, but this is something that staff have been working on for a few years now on identifying our sites in the state of Texas. We did something like this in response to Harvey and how folks could find where a temporary debris management site was located for them to take in their waste. And we ended up putting some of the sites that were in the impact zone on there, but that was through Google. It was not something that we maintained. It was through their website that we made it accessible for folks to find an easy way to go and find where they could take their stuff. This one is being prepared for long-lived use, and we started by identifying all the landfills in the state. And there's a lot of GIS data that goes behind this, but essentially what it is a way of someone going, well, tell me, which one do y'all want to see? What landfill do you want to see? Is there anything in particular y'all want me to pull up? No? Just pick one. Let me just pick this little dot when it updates, which may or may not update because we don't get new laptops at the state very much.
While you're waiting on that, so these are just going to be sites that you guys administer. Is this MSW as well as industrial?
Industrial's not on here yet, but we could develop, if they have GIS data for their sites, we can put that on there. What this is it's a live program that hits central registry, and so any updates that you do in a core data form to your site, it's going to take that information and update it. And so things that we have. Okay, no, I'm hearing no. My understanding is that that's how this stuff was populated when we got address and phone number and things that are associated with the central registry. That's not correct?
It's not live. It's a static list. We'll update every year.
Oh, it updates every year. Okay.
Is the intent for all authorized MSW facilities eventually to be mapped like this?
Yes.
At all levels?
Yes. The only thing right now we have on there is landfills, but the next phase is registrations. And then we do medical waste. And so everything would have a legend and identifiers. Oh, NOIs, well, possibly, yes.
Eventually.
That's a little bit trickier. There is something.
Yes, that's why.
Yeah,
That's
there
why
is one for our PSTs, petroleum storage tanks, that's been around for a long time. And when you pull that one up, it's a lot of information. And I thought they pulled that from Central Registry often.
Okay. Currently, what we have mapped here is the active landfills. The plan is to do all of the MSW facilities that we have the lat longs for. So eventually, we'll have that information. What the drop down has is information about the and this information, Chance is correct. This information is from Central Registry. It's just not automatically pulling. Like when you click on something, it's not automatically pulling data. So it's from a attribute table that we'll have to keep updated. And we'll probably do that when we do the annual reporting once a year. The goal was to get the contact information for the phone numbers for the actual facilities, for the public. It kind of came out of the 2011, the bathtub fires, when we were trying to get information out to the public, for the emergencies. Where can we take, and like for the hurricane stuff, where can we take our stuff? But it'll also be for, the regions, our regions, TCQ regions, to be able to, get information. So it's a public tool, it's an internal tool, and it's something that we hope will be beneficial to everybody.
If the intent is for that to continue to support the public in the event of various types of catastrophes, it's all the more reason to try to include the notice and even exempt facilities on there, given that those are the facilities that can take a lot of that material. Just an observation.
Okay. I don't know if our NOIs are requiring GIS Latin longs.
Anything with a core data form that we receive that's on the core data form.
Oh, okay.
There's Latin long on every core data form.
Okay. I would, this is not live yet, obviously. This is a working copy, but we plan to put this out there soon. And we'll probably do a gov delivery, letting folks know that it exists. From there, we'll start populating data and updating that map. And if someone was to use it, they would just see the new information on there. There'll be an instruction page and a legend of what information is on there. But I'll find out more about how the other map viewer that's used by the Petroleum Storage Tanks program is how that is updated, if it's updated annually, or because that has a lot of information on it. And my understanding was it was always when someone used it, it always was corresponding with Central Registry. So
Chance, you may have done this, or your programmers may have done this, but if they haven't, some of the larger counties and some of the councils of governments already have systems like this for their areas. Are very excellent. Not that you would want to comment, but it might be worth clicking through a couple of them to get an idea on presentation, how it looks, what information is there. I'm trying to remember, Cheryl, at HGAC, like one of the things it has is hours.
Yeah, ours has the TCQ, solid waste permits, the landfills,
Station.
HHW, recycling centers. It's basically GIS platform too. I can send it to you.
Okay.
But I just pulled it up for ours. Basically, for the landfills, have the exact same thing. It's the hours of operation for the recycling and HHW that we did a little bit of added value
Because of the citizens' use.
Yes.
Yeah.
The North Central Texas Council of Government website also is very robust.
Okay.
And this probably, I know it's a completely different agency within the state, but it is a waste disposal site. Some of the Railroad Commission disposal sites, it'd probably be nice if you had a map where all of those were on there and you could see all waste disposal sites in Texas, be it MSW or oil field waste.
Yeah, it's really all dependent on how data talks to data. So anyway, I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Oh, that's great.
We've
That's
been
great.
we've been working with it and having to work with our Information Resource Division on how it could be managed in a reasonable way. We didn't want it to become stagnant.
I've been using this map for years, and it's tough.
So, I mean, that
So-
tool, when it's built out, will be a tremendous resource to
Great.
people doing local planning.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Because we're doing it the hard way now, and it's time consuming.
Yeah, we actually had it gotten it off the ground and started with an intern. So we have gotten to the point where staff had to take over and get to where it is today. So
Remember how long it's been since you first really mentioned this. Seems like it's been about 3 or 4 years, hasn't it, or at least?
yeah, we had the problem is we had to go in and validate all the data and just the contact information and chase that down for a start. And then there was a little bit of time lapse on getting a ticket to help get the GIS team to get us in the queue to work on this project. We have a priority here at the agency, and things take other priority over certain things. So we're kind of waiting in queue to get that priority to get worked on. So we finally got that.
Well, it's a big job, and it's, as others have already said, it'll be a tool that'll be helpful to a lot of people in the future.
We agree. So anyways, I was just bringing it to your attention. That's all. So
Well, speak a little bit more about, your spreadsheet now, when you have to reference, kind of talk a little bit about, now that you've implemented it since last September and you've seen several come through, is that accomplishing what you guys wanted it to do as far as helping you in your actual process? I mean, can you speak a little bit about how it's working?
Sure. The checklist referring, yes, it is continuing to be what we thought it would do, and it would facilitate a consistent review among each of our staff. Some of the things that we're seeing and fine tuning is how the checklist is being prepared by our customers, and then inevitably how we're using it when we speak back to the customer. For example, the location information is something that the applicant puts on there, and in the event that the staff find that it's in a slightly different location than indicated on the checklist, we have some that would say, oh, this is where I actually found where it was, and they'll make the changes on the checklist, letting them know it was actually on this area versus that area, a little bit more specific. And then there's others that are like, no, I don't want to change the location, which they say, I want to tell them that it's another location, and they'll make another note somewhere saying, I found it in this location, it's not a deficiency, I just want to, to let you know it needs to be you need to update your location information. So there's some things that we're working through, deciding how we'll handle that. We're not really making a deficiency of it. It's just more or less, hey, it's going to be a learning process, but from my staff and those that we're trying to get to use a checklist on how it's going to be used. There's going to be some time for people to get accustomed on how to use that information to where my staff are not having to update the checklist and location information. Of course, if we can't find it, it would become a deficiency. You said it was here, we've been looking for it, it's not there, so that's not the case. But that's really the only thing that I would think that could be improved upon, is that we spend a lot of time trying to be very direct in our comments and not really do a lot of explaining. Let the rule do the explaining, and just say an action verb there, like provide or submit. If we say omitted, that's it. We don't need to go and tell you what's omitted. You go to the rule and you find what was omitted, and it's usually probably a location issue. And it's like it's omitted. The location you indicated is not there, it's omitted. So a lot of times it's like, oh, I need to provide a better location and point us where it would be. But it's really, I think as staff get used to the way it flows, the wording and how it's used, and our customers use it, I think it's just going to get better and better. I know we spend a lot less time rewording things that we used to do when we wrote paragraphs for an item. So anyway.
Well, the bottom line, it is helping your staff in your whole review process, which I guess was the ultimate goal anyway.
Yeah. Just, to give Kristen a little bit more kudos, some of the projects she's been working on, not only that she's used this new way of doing things, because she didn't know the old way. She's been doing the new way the whole time. She actually, every project she's got her hands on, she's actually pushed out before our internal established deadlines. So she's been ahead on all of our timeframes. So I think that's not only her work ethic, but I think the tools that we're trying to implement is helping that along. So anyway, thanks for asking. We'll be talking about it at Trade Fair a little bit and explaining why we are where we are today and where we came from. So nominations are coming up. I don't know. I know one council member was asking me kind of time frames and what we're looking ahead. And I invited Jean to come up, and if y'all want to hear about that, and y'all interested in the time frames and the timeline for the new nominations and what those positions are. Yeah. Okay. You can sit here. I don't care.
I was just commenting to Risa, it's like 6 years? Where did the time go? Good morning.
Good morning.
It's because we're having so much fun.
We're having so much fun.
Gene Mueller, Section Manager in the Waste Permits Division. So yeah, provide a quick update on the council member nominations. My section is the one that will work through that process. So as y'all know, the 18 members of this advisory council serve 6 year staggered terms. So that results in 6 openings every 2 years. And we have 6 openings coming up in August of this year. So August 31st, 2019, we have 6 term expirations. I believe in your packet, there should be a page that identifies those expirations, and perfect. So that will show you whose terms are expiring. What we have right now out of these expirations in August 2019, currently there's 5 members and there's 1 vacancy in that group. So what we're looking to do is we've submitted to the Texas Register a notice for the request for nominations, and we sent that to the Texas Register in late March. And some dates you'll be interested in is we're looking to have it published in the Texas Register on May 3rd, 2019. So that's the request for nominations. And the nominations will close on June 4th, 2019. We will be posting the application where you can either self-nominate or nominate, one of your friends or anyone that you think deserves that position. You can nominate someone else as well. And that application will be available on our MISRAC webpage, on the TCQ MISRAC webpage, starting May 3rd. So if you like, I can run through all the 8 openings. What we have is the 6 upcoming vacancies, and we also have 2 current vacancies. So those are for positions that run through August 2023. So we're also going to go ahead and open those up as well for nominations. So there will be a total of 8 openings. If you need any more information on those, I do have those 8 listed, but again, they may be right there in your packet.
I see Dave Yonke's name on here, and he called me last night, by the way. He was in Denver, and his flight was canceled yesterday because of high winds, so he wanted me to express his regrets for not being here today. I failed to do that earlier.
And then one other note, what we'll be working for is to have these nominations for the commissioners. Obviously, the commissioners are the ones that identify the new council members, and we'll be proposing that up to them during fall agenda. So our plan is to have all those members identified by the next council, advisory council meeting in October 2019. So I think the date is October 10th. So we're looking to have everything ready by that meeting.
So for those that are on the list, having expirations for this year, if we wish to continue to serve, we just reapply, get in the hopper, and then wait for them to tell us whether they agree for us to continue to serve.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
It seems like in past, they've actually come to the October meeting, and those new members didn't take their seats until January the following year. Is that still kind of the timeline?
It just depends on the schedule, the commissioner's schedule. If your meeting schedule coincides with theirs, we may know at that point what they decide, but they don't actually come in until January. Right, yeah. But we sometimes know when we meet, and then sometimes we won't know until right after we meet, but everybody knows that they're showing up at the next meeting. I think that's what happened last time. We didn't know when we met, but then they had the agenda, we knew, and then we had to let them know that the next meeting, please attend on January. I think that's what happened with Rosemary and Trent. So.
Yeah, we looked at the dates and we tried to get things lined up to where our goal was to have them in attendance in October. At least that was the way that my section looked at it, is we're aiming
Well,
for that.
I think
how
that's better. That I think fits better with the fiscal year anyway, so.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Anybody have anything for Gene they'd like to add?
Chance, would you like me to jump into a quick scrap tire?
Yeah, if you'd like to. You brought up some stuff on tires last time. So.
Yeah, just real quick. Then since the last meeting in January, I gave you some scrap tire updates, and it was in regards to the EPA, where we're waiting for a letter from EPA that would identify an additional option to use discarded tires. And I described there's 4.4 million unauthorized tires out there that are considered discarded out of the total 14.4 million unauthorized tires out there. But just to give you a quick update, following that meeting on February 2nd, 2019, we did get that letter from EPA, which allowed discarded tires to be used as tire-derived fuel at cement kilns with some minimal processing. So before it required approximately 90% metal removal. Now it's dropped down to 2 to 10%. But the whole issue there was you had one tire on the ground that wasn't considered discarded versus a tire on the ground that was considered discarded. Due to non-hazardous secondary material rules, the tire that was considered discarded had additional requirements for air regulations. So there was more stringent air regulations on if you wanted to use that tire as tire-derived fuel. So the cement kilns, didn't want to, they're not going to want to spend all the money to retrofit for that. So the success of this is just that now that tire can be used at cement kilns. So it's specific for cement kilns. And we did post that letter on the scrap tire website for TCQ. So if you'd like to see the EPA letter, it's under a hot tab, so it draws your attention. But did want to let you all know that did happen. So that worked out really well. They got that letter in February, so we're very excited about it. Also, I think I mentioned that the annual reports were coming in, so we did get those. We are working on the scrap tire annual report, so hopefully we'll have a draft of that sometime in the next month or two. So just something to look out for. That's it. Any questions on that?
I guess you could bring that in the July meeting we could talk about that once you kind of simulated that data.
Yeah, it's a very interesting report. So if we have it prepped and ready to go, we'll definitely present that information and share it with y'all.
Gene, I have a question. Where are the, in proximity to the cement plants, which is up I-35 normally, where are the tires that are discarded that you're considering out of the 14 million?
So now there's the whole 14 million, and we do have maps available, and I have one actually right here that identifies the tires, as in the managed versus non-managed. So what we have is we have 8 total facilities that are energy recovery, but you're correct, 7 are cement kilns. So what you'll have is kind of the I-35 corridor, but we do have a map that identifies the now 96 sites that have these unauthorized tires. Now, 76 of those are the ones, 76 sites are the ones that this EPA letter now addresses. Those are the tires that were considered discarded. So these are where the tire piles are in relation to those 7 cement kilns. Your cement kilns are typically along the I-35 corridors where you'll see them, and you will see there's a significant amount of tires in that general area.
Seems like another GIS opportunity there.
Yes.
Anyone else have anything for Gene?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The only other thing I have left is just to remind you that Trade Fair is going to be coming up very soon. May 14th and 15th is the days that Trade Fair. We're on actually the 14th, Tuesday. And you have it. Yeah, I think you have an insert in your packet of our tract and the presentations that we'll be presenting on landfill mining, closure and post-closure. And we're gonna have 2 sessions on MSW. It's like a one-on-one on MSW. Basically, kind of going over each of our type of authorization processes we have laid out that's under our purview, and kind of some of the things that we have done to each of those, and then tires is going to round it out on the end. So, any questions for me? That is all I have to update at this point.
Thank you, Chance. I have one question back on your org chart. Could you explain the relationship between the work leaders and how they're set up? Because you have like team 1 under Goliath, and she's got a group of staff, and then you have a work leader with Mario Pettis. And so I'm just curious, how do they work together? Is there a certain task that the work group does that the team does not, or?
Sure. Makes sense. That's the question. So we fundamentally break this down by the type of authorizations that we process, and so each of those teams, like Goliath's team and Matthew's team, they'll do it all. You know, they'll do major amendments, new permits, registrations. They'll do NOIs. But the group that Mario is, sometimes those members strictly will focus on quantity versus not that there's not quality there, but there's quantity. NOIs. There's a lot of NOIs that come through, a lot of paperwork involved with that. So generally, that group will tend to focus more on an NOI or maybe a subchapter T project or something like that, something that has a little bit shorter time frame. So it's a well-oiled machine and things can be moving a little bit better. They're used to that process. Not to say that any one of those visuals do not do a bigger project. It's just they're more accustomed to those routine type of administrative processes that are associated with like an NOI. So that's that regard. And then the work group that you see down there in Matthew's team and Brandon, that's really strictly focused on groundwater reports. So we have, we do our own statistics analysis on groundwater annually. And so that group is really, when that comes in annually at the beginning of the calendar year, they're really kind of hands off on other projects, and they really buckle down and try to get those reports done. And then once those start tailing off and freeing up their time, then they'll start picking up projects that the other team does. That's kind of the big picture
level.
Good, well, thank you. That's a good explanation to kind of help understand what those different groups are doing.
Sure. And
Well,
Diane keeps the wheels from falling off all that.
Well, that's, I was gonna say, you've got another geologist back there behind you that I guess if you get behind, you can always pull her back in. Well, you've kind of, now we're only 5 minutes ahead, so. Okay, next, if I can find my agenda. Here it is. Oh, we'll get Kimberly Lau. Gets to speak about the Regional Solid Waste Grants Program. Giving away money, right?
That's what we aim to do. As long as we get the money, we can give it away.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm gonna see if this works to advance it. All right. Well, like Holly said, and I will say, Holly, I was in Lubbock for about 10 years. And I was, if I have a microphone on. Now it is. Now I can hear me. Was in Lubbock for about 10 years working for a couple of different people, and I know that you probably watched the game the same way I did on Monday, but we're so proud of our folks. Those guys did a great job. You were there. Oh, man. Well, it was a good time. Definitely different weather than we have here, for sure. You should all have in front of you the Regional Solid Waste Grants Report. This is a report that the regional councils of government put together every year. And before I even get into this, I want to say a special thank you to the team at HGAC that helps all of the regions throughout the state coordinate their information, pull it together, and put it into this handy little guide that helps us tell the story of the impact that these grants have across the state in diverting waste from landfills and keeping our state safe and healthy and beautiful. Let's see if I can get myself organized over here. So just a recap, the Regional Solid Waste Grants Program is in statute. It's in Chapter 361 of the Texas Health and Safety Code. And this program kind of outlines what the grant funds are for. It sets it up in statute, and the report in front of you is part of that statutory requirement. If the legislature is going to give you money, they want to make sure that you're putting it to good use. So that's what this guide in front of you does. So how the program works through it by collecting trash from your citizens. It gets picked up. And it's loaded into trucks, delivered to landfills. Once those trucks go to the landfills, they're assessed a tipping fee for the trash that they deliver. So every load that's dumped into the landfill is assessed a fee. 33% of the amount that is collected from that fee is deposited into a separate account for the Regional Solid Waste Grants Program. And then the legislature looks at the money in that program and appropriates whatever they deem appropriate to the regional, or to TCEQ, and it then goes to the regional councils by an allocation as laid out in the statute. And then those monies are taken from the regional councils, use their allocations, and accept applications for grants from local communities, and then provide those so that they have resources to engage in all sorts of activities that we'll go into in a minute. And just to recap, regional councils of government are voluntary associations of local governments. They are created by Chapter 391 of the Texas Local Government Code. In addition to solid waste, the regional councils do a bevy of programs, including aging services, 911 coordination, criminal justice, emergency preparedness planning services, and really anything else that is needed by the members of the region. So the great thing about regional councils of government is that they help to meet those unique needs of the regions they serve. So why regional planning and coordination? They offer technical assistance to those local governments to help them implement their programs, implement grant programs. They help to administer those grants. They also look at evaluating the solid waste management programs of the local governments, provide education and outreach activities, assist with printed materials that can be updated to meet those local and unique needs. And they also provide regional trainings, so environmental enforcement training for law enforcement officers and disaster debris management, which in 1617 became a really big load for several of our regions in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. So why is it important to use the COGS to oversee these grants? They're familiar with their local governments. They're familiar with the entities that they're working with. So the grant proposals are evaluated by public and private experts, most notably through their solid waste advisory councils, of which Commissioner Pitts serves on in the CapCog area. The regional councils are also accountable, and they have accountability mechanisms built into their daily operations. Just last biennium, they administered grants that ranged from $324 to $370,000 plus dollars. And all of those come with legislatively mandated methods of accountability that they have to meet. They also partner with their local governments to help and develop their regional solid waste management plans, so they know what the goals of their local governments are and then can take a holistic view of what is going on throughout the region to ensure that efficiencies are met and services are not duplicated unnecessarily. So we had a lot going on in the 2016-2017 biennium. With this program, there were 238 total projects that were funded using the $5.4 million that the regional councils of governments received. That included 130 city projects and 55 county projects, in addition to region-wide projects, school districts, and other administration. So these are some of my favorite numbers. I think this really tells the story of the impact that this program has across the state. Using these grant funds, we were able to investigate 5,421 illegal dumping sites and that collected more than $300,000 in fines. 3.4 million pounds of waste were removed from illegal dump sites through this program. In addition, the regional solid waste grants diverted 91 million pounds of recyclables, and that's equivalent to 9,261 recycling truckloads. So that's a pretty good amount. Used electronics are collected at collection facilities that are held throughout the state. Over the last biennium, we collected 4.8 million pounds of used electronics using the grant funding. And then this one's one of my favorites. For household hazardous waste, there were almost 25,000 Texans who participated in household hazardous waste programs and drop-off events. 53 pounds of household hazardous waste were dropped off on average by each of those participants. And with all of the paint that was collected through these household hazardous waste events, you could paint the state of Texas, the outline of the state of Texas, 26 times. So what did our regions do with these grant dollars? I'm not going through all of them, but you can see more information on the programs and activities funded by each region. Each region has their own separate page that tells their own separate story, but we'll just go through a few of them here today. In the Alamo Area Council of Governments in the city of Seguin, they funded curbside pickup of household hazardous waste for their citizens. So instead of having to go to a drop-off site, they were able to come and make it even more convenient for their citizens to pick up or to dispose of those household hazardous wastes that can get into our water systems and cause pollution and safety hazards. in the Capcog region, and I know we've got Ken here from the Capcog region. They partnered with the Austin Independent School District on a zero waste program, and this program has worked to divert 12,900, so almost 13,000 tons of waste from landfills through recycling and composting. And what you see here is just a shot of the receptacles and the education pieces that are used at schools throughout AISD to help encourage those kids to divert their materials. And in East Texas Council of Governments, I thought this was staggering. They were able to fund 33 projects that impacted 22 local governments. One of the projects that you can see here is this trash receptacle that, instead of being open so that trash can blow out of it, it is enclosed and sturdy, so it keeps that that trash and everything from blowing around and littering the roads. So one of the events that took place in the Houston-Galveston Area Council region was in Chambers County, where they were able to remove more than almost 250,000 pounds of tires. And these tires will go for use in playgrounds and football fields. So that's pretty impressive, because I think we all know tires are a big issue that face our local governments. Another project that the Houston-Galveston Area Council did, especially in the wake of Harvey, was putting together this flyer. It's a one-page flyer that talks to residents about how to separate out their debris after a disaster. As you can see, it's eye-catching and informative, and the team at HGAC did a great job on this, so much so that there were about 20 governments, including FEMA, that used this flyer to help educate members of the public on how to separate out all of the trash and the debris that was really one of the biggest issues that folks had to face in the aftermath of that gigantic storm. So congratulations, HGAC. In the North Central Texas Council of Governments area, they worked with the city of Cedar Hill. In just 2 collection events, they were able to gather more than 20,000 pounds of household hazardous waste, from electronics to paint to oil. So all of that not only helped the citizens get rid of the stuff that they had in their house, but also allowed them to dispose of all of that safely. And these are just one event, one project from each of the regions. As you'll look in there, you'll see that there are multiple projects funded. So this program really does have a wide-reaching effect. And in the South Plains Association of Governments region, these grants went to the city of Meadow and Meadow ISD and helped them recycle more than 55,000 pounds, which have been collected and diverted from the landfills in that area as well. So that's about all I have, but I did want to reach out to and again see if Commissioner Pitts, who sits on the Solid Waste Advisory Council in the Capcog region and also on this body, and Cheryl Morrow as a member of the HGAC and our representative from a regional planning commission. Is there anything I missed, something you want to make sure that I touch on or that this body knows about from all of the great work that we were able to talk about in this fantastic report?
Right here is a really good program of what happened with that money. Cheryl was behind all this, so, and Richard's on the Solid Waste Committee at Capcog also, so.
I would venture to say a lot of you guys serve on your local COG, Solid Waste Management Committee, and the only success that we have is based on our partnerships with our local governments, our privates, our nonprofits. So for those of you who do serve, we appreciate it. Thank you. And TCQ has always been a great partner with us.
Absolutely.
And majority of these projects are just not one little town, but they're regional projects. That's what we had 2 counties come together and a household hazardous waste system that we put together. And it's really, really helped. It's been a great asset to both counties. And several cities in both those counties have really come together. But it's really supported regionalism, and everybody's working together on this. And thank you for what you do for us.
I wouldn't be here without you guys. Are there any questions? I'm happy
Ken
to.
May,
Yeah.
our hero.
Kimberly, just a real quick one, sorry. The projects are broken down by categories, and some of them are pretty self-evident: education and training, local enforcement, recycling. Can you or Cheryl or Maurice, what is general solid waste management? What's an example of those type projects?
I will probably have to defer to Cheryl on that one. She's the expert in the room.
Sorry, I have to think for a second. I'm going to defer because I can't recall at the top of my head.
All right. No, that's fair enough.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't remember, and I have sat on your solid waste advisory committee for decades, and that.
At a local level, they're not called these. This is how the TCQ categorizes them, so
I
for
see.
their databases. So in order to be consistent across all the COGs, we go with the TCQ classification, and they roll it up. And
that, Cheryl, would those be kind of equipment and, you know, some folks have trailers to assist with the hauling from their recycling centers. Is that what might fall into those categories?
I'm going to say sure.
All right.
Because I don't know 100%. Ken, do you recall?
You're right.
Okay. Again, we don't view them in those terms. We usually break it down to something that's a little bit more manageable in our minds.
I didn't recognize it, and I've
Sorry.
sat on the committees for a long time.
Don't fire me.
But no, that's.
When I read it, that's what I think of, so, could be wrong, but that's, when I read it, that's what I think of.
Okay. Very nice, thank you.
Just a quick comment. Obviously, these grant programs are fantastic. The city apparently was a beneficiary of the brochure that was done and distributed. I didn't know it was funded by this, but I'm glad to see that that's how how that was paid for. I just one comment. I mean, this is partially funded by fines. Based on the numbers that are provided in the brochure, 5,400 illegal dumping sites equated into $300,000 in fines. That's an average of $56 per illegal dumping site.
I can address that. So the fines actually don't support this program. The fines are collected at a local level, and they go back to the local government who did the collection or did the investigation. There is usually a very long delay, so depending on the size of the case, the fines may not be seen to 2 or 3 years. For example, for City of Houston, it takes them a while. They do the investigation, they file, they have to get on the docket for Harris County for the enforcement, either criminal or civil. So that is just a snapshot. And not all the fines are reported back to us, depending on the local government, how good they are reporting. And it's one of the things, we work with them, but I must tell you, we don't hound them. We rather them focus on the investigation. And then when it gets to the prosecution, if they can report back to us, we do that. But it's not something that we follow through years after years. And also Cheryl Edemeyer, who is my contact at the TCQ, told me that it is illegal dumping and mostly cleanups in that other general category. So thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Well, does anyone else have anything for Kim?
How's my jacket look, Cheryl? She's watching on TV.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, all right, we are on schedule now. So, great job, everyone. Next thing is the approval of the January 10th, 2019 meeting highlights that you will find in your packet. And I'll give everyone a moment, if you haven't looked at it, to see if there are any additions or comments that you'd like to make. And if none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approval.
Second.
I don't know. Motion by Maurice Pitts and second by Trent Pettis. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Those can now be published and put on the website. Action items, do we have anything that's out there that Diane has on her list, or?
I guess for this meeting, the action items for this meeting would be, Cheryl and Jeffrey are going to provide us some of their GIS websites so we could take a look at them, right? That was one of them. And then y'all wanted to possibly, if it's ready, hear a little bit about the tire annual report, if the data's ready, right, for the next meeting.
And a list of all the House bills that you guys are tracking.
And then the next one would be
Or
a
House and
summary.
Senate.
We'll provide a summary of
Summary will be done.
of all those that we have done, so, yeah. Okay.
Great. Okay. Do you want to have anything else? I was going to mention, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but the EPA has out in their Federal Register right now soliciting comments until, I think it's in May 10th, regarding removing the ban of bulk liquids. And it's targeted obviously at bioreactor or enhanced leachate recirculation projects.
Yeah, I think that's in the meeting minutes from the
From
highlights
last
for
time,
last
yeah.
meeting. I brought that up saying the comment period is open for that. I think
Yeah,
they
it was over
extended-
in March, but
they
they've extended it now
extended it, yeah.
to May.
Right. Good catch, thank you.
With that, I will open the floor for any public comments. If anyone in the audience has anything they'd like to bring forward to the council, you may do so now. Just step up to the podium. Don't everybody fight for it first. Well, I guess if there are no public comments, we will wrap this meeting up. Next meeting scheduled for July the 11th, 2019. If there's not anything else, I will say we are adjourned. Thank you.